Hello, this is our talk show project I'm hosting. My name is Mr. Westcott, and these are
I'm Miss Cipoletti.
I'm Mr. Castellon.
I'm Miss Sullins.
I'm Ms. Gutierrez.
I'm Mrs. Sayas.
I'm Mr. Marsh.
And we're just going to field some questions about the text to John Milton's Paradise Lost. So we're going to begin with Miss Cipoletti. So what is your question from the text?
Sure. My OQ is basically asking whether or not we would consider Eve to be Adam's weakness. And basically where I got this question from was how we had previously talked about in class that Adam really didn't have the questions about God and their placement in the garden like Eve had. So it showed Eve's weakness was curiosity and a want of knowledge, where Adam didn't have that desire. So I'm wondering what is Adam's weakness and can we pin it on Eve?
All right. I was going to say, Nestor, starting off then, what do you think? Is Eve Adam's weakness?
Well, I think she is because in the story, I think she envies the fact that he does that he doesn't want her to be, I guess, stricken by like whatever evil that has come over her. So again, so he's like going in, like he's going over in his head, like okay, like maybe I should have God created Eve for me. And she doesn't want that. She's extremely envious of that idea, and she doesn't want him to reject her. So, I mean, I think that the lustfulness that we talked about in class, I think definitely gets a hold of Adam, and that's what kind of drives him to be mystified by her, and she seduces him in that sort of way.
So in a sense, that Satan's manipulating the sexuality of Eve to further tempt.
I think that's definitely what it is.
That's good. Okay, awesome. What do you think?
Going off what Mr. Castellon said, I see a quote on page 234, line 999, and it says, "Against his better knowledge, not deceived, but fondly overcome with female charm." So going off the like lusty lust part, I feel like that definitely like was enticing to him. And then at the end, he mentions like how he warned her, and like he had basically like foretold that like her choosing to separate during work would like lead to this, and now he's never gonna trust her again. So like her just coming off as very charming and enticing, and like having that like relationship that he wanted, like really kind of like rocked the boat with them.
Yeah.
So I definitely think that like her charm, and like honestly like when Satan was using flattery to like kind of reel her in, that definitely like for sure like boosted her ego into thinking that she was going to be more convincing to Adam. So
I definitely agree. I feel like she was most definitely Adam's weakness because of just even the way she described during the sex scene. It does say, like, I think it's on line 131, and it says, "With all perfection so inflame my sense with ardor to enjoy thee fairer now than ever bounty of this virtuous tree." And it just kind of explains, like, once again, like, he was so kind of entranced by her, and he had kind of almost no control over, like, his desire for her, and that was something that, like, it spoke to, like, how much he kind of needed her in that moment, and it wasn't like as though he could kind of control how he felt about her. So I think that's just a perfect instance of you know, him being, or her being his weakness.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with what you guys said. Also, like, Adam reasoned through what he knew was right, that, you know, God told them not to do something, and he knew that that's what they were supposed to do, but he reasoned through it, and the punishment that was supposed to happen to them, just to follow what he was telling him to do, so that's definitely showing that she's his weakness.
Yeah. Going on with what Mrs. Say said, I think with the fall, Eve was definitely part of, or led to. The fall was led from Eve, and she was a weakness because you said that she was curious, like at first when she was created from his rib, and just like if it wasn't for her being tempted by the serpent and going to him and kind of doing the serpent's work, for him, then or the fall wouldn't have been completed, I guess.
No, I think it's also, you mentioned Satan, and I think that's interesting because he's actually excited when he finds Eve alone on page 220. Then let me not but pass the occasion which now smiles. Behold alone the woman opportune to all attempts. Her husband for I view far round, not nigh, whose higher intellection more I shun. So in a sense, seems to be targeting what Satan perceives to be the weaker of the two. But I think what's interesting also is then going back to what we spoke about earlier in our class where there was this debate between Adam and Eve as to what's the danger if this is paradise. And I guess it's kind of ironic that if we admit the possibility that Eve is the weakest link, that she herself is the danger to the paradise, which would be a disturbing thought, I guess, because she is made to complete Adam and is supposed to find God through Adam. So it kind of makes you question why did she get there in the first place if she was going to foul things up and be the way to which Satan corrupts Adam. So yeah, that's a good way to start, I guess. Go ahead. So I guess we should start on into another question. So Nestor, what do you have for us?
Yeah, so I mean, this question's been bothering me for a while. So like, my question basically stems off from the idea that on page 232, Adam is presented. Eve presents herself to Adam, and he's just horrified. He's so horrified by the person who she has become. And he starts to think up ideas in his head. Okay, so like, how can I create a new Eve? Like, maybe there's something else that I can ask God for in return. Like maybe it could be a new lover or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so Eve is taken back by this idea, and like this is what I was talking about before. That like she's envious of his idea of even thinking of having another lover, and she's so taken back by that. So. Two questions that kind of stem from that is that why does Adam even suggest the idea? I mean, although he is horrified, like why would he even consider having someone else as a lover? And also, why does she want him? Why does Eve want Adam to suffer the same fate that she has after seeing that he is now thinking these thoughts of having another lover? So that's what I had been thinking about.
So then why would Adam consider taking another Eve, so to speak, and then why does Eve bring Adam down this path?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like it's almost as if, I mean, for me, I feel like because he thought of this, that like she's purposely bringing him down. So like that's why I asked that last question there.
Going off that, to answer the first question about why he would ever think of creating another Eve, in that passage that you read, it says, should God create another Eve and I another rib afford, yet loss of thee would never from my heart know I feel, willing of nature draw me, flesh of flesh, bone of my bone, thou art from thy state. So basically, I feel like that is like him thinking about like another Eve, but it's also like him talking about how like, I look at him mentioning like how he like loves Eve, because like he thinks about it, then he thinks like actually he could like never actually replace Eve, but that's his like partner for life. But he does look at her differently after she eats the fruit, and I think that she wants to lead him down that road because later on she talks about how like that now that they're equal, because there was a lack of equality that she felt and that there actually was in between them, because as Mr. Westcott mentioned earlier about like man being more intellectual than women, but I think that she really wanted to be like fulfill her life and like share that with Adam as well as like be on the same level and equal with him.
Okay.
No, and to kind of go off of that too, that I think that there is something that I kind of noticed as well, was that Adam beforehand was making a crown for Eve, and then he drops it out of heart. And we see even earlier on that the serpent refers to Eve as like his queen, his empress, his goddess, and so there is this exaltation of the woman that's going on. And so he's really built her up in a sense, and I think that there is something to be said for how much he's elevated her in his mind. So you're right, he entertains the idea, but I think he puts it perfectly in his own words. It's not as much his rib that he's given up, but his heart.
Yeah.
He has worked up to that point.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's more why I saw why he didn't turn down, why he turned down the possibility of another Eve. I was gonna say, do you have an answer to either one of those questions?
Yeah, I feel like going off of the first question you asked, I think he kind of created, or he was thinking of creating another Eve, because, I mean, if you look at up to 9, I think it's 897, he says, O fairest of creation, last and best of all God's work, creature in whom excels whatever into sight or thought could be formed. And it's just clear from those lines, I feel like, how, like, high of a pedestal he put Eve on.
Mhm.
And so, like, I mean, he's calling her the fairest of creation, he's calling her, like, one of the best things that he's ever kind of had in his life. So
Yeah.
I think the thought of Adam not having that is kind of just, it's hard for him to, you know, think of. So I think that's why, you know, he kind of thought of creating Eve, because he couldn't imagine his life without her.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I think about it.
I agree. I feel like Adam is really disappointed with Eve and what she has done. And Adam, from the beginning, he wanted to respect God and
Can you log on? I was gonna say, good.
See 1, 2, 3.
Gotcha.
That's not
It's
We're still going. It's still going.
Yes.
We come back from this commercial break. Go ahead. So sorry, we cut you off.
You know, you were saying that that he was very disappointed in Eve.
Yeah, he was really disappointed, but he also wanted to respect God, and so he thought about like having another Eve.
Yeah,
which
so he
made
probably
it right
felt
with
bad
God.
asking God to create another partner for him.
Yes.
Yeah, so I guess maybe, so the question is, why did he think of having another Eve? Just basically, well, as of now, Adam and Eve are the only man and woman that's around, so I guess since there's no other options of woman or man, he's just kind of thinking of
No, you're
Just
right.
someone
There's
that's
no
not-
one else left.
Yeah.
Also, isn't this before he eats the fruit?
Yeah, so he's
Yeah.
speaking before he actually eats the fruit.
Okay.
Yeah, at this point he's like really freaked out. She has just revealed herself to him, and like he's just completely freaked out.
Okay. But why would he think of having another Eve, but then ends up going along eating the fruit because he can't see life without her?
To go off of that, I'm reading here, it says on page 229 at the very bottom, but to Adam, in what sort shall I appear? Shall I to him make known as yet my change and give him to partake full happiness with me, or rather not, but keep the odds of knowledge in my power without co-partner? So to add what wants in female sex to more draw his love and render me more equal and perhaps. So she's basically saying that she feels justified that she's like equal to him. So she talks about how like she wants to like share this, like it's not right, it's like her co-partner.
I mean, from that line too, like, I mean, the line you just read, like, from what I got from that, I feel like she's also possibly talking about, like, how, like, now that Satan has told her, like, how beautiful she is and, like, has worked her up to be, like, this perfect, beautiful woman, that now she's going to use that to kind of draw him in.
Yeah, and she's like debating like, do I want to keep all of this knowledge and power to myself, or like share it? And I definitely think that she wants to share everything she has with that.
I was going to say, let's wrap up this question with this bloody. I was going to say, could you answer maybe either one of Nestor's 2 points? Why did Eve choose to bring Adam down, and why did Adam choose not to pick another Eve?
I think that when I first read this, I looked at Adam and I said, you know, like, are you really thinking about the situation and logically? Like, just because you're so in love with this woman, are you really going about this in the most logical path? And the one thing that makes me think that Adam is more logical thinking than we had originally assumed is that he considers the option of another Eve. You know, at first he does say, how can I live without Eve? And then a couple lines later, then he questions whether or not he can get another Eve. So I think that this questioning in general is just important for Adam's character and the way that we view him as equal on the intelligence level with Eve.
That was a good 2-part question. I was going to say, moving right along then, what do you have for discussion?
My IQ question is, what knowledge does Eve actually get from the forbidden fruit? Because when she eats the fruit, she says, by thee I grow more in knowledge as the gods who all things know. So I want to know, what exactly is that knowledge? Like, it's never explicitly said what knowledge, it's just all the things that she feels, like, what do you guys think, like, that knowledge, like, really is?
That's a good question.
I can jump in real
Go
fast and
ahead,
start it
yeah.
off. I think the first thing that she has knowledge of is power, because now that since like before this point in time, Adam has kind of always been in charge, whether or not it's in communication with God or the plans or whatever they're doing, Adam's in charge. And for the first time in the book, she has this newfound power and just the knowledge of what it's like to have information that somebody else doesn't.
It's like uplifting for her. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like also another thing that she gains was also when she does eat the fruit, she kind of gains a sense of just she knows more. Like the point that I noticed was that when they eat the fruit, then they realize that they're naked. So that was, she in a way loses her innocence, and I think that's a way of gaining knowledge because she was kind of blinded to so many things about herself and about other people before she ate the fruit. And when she did, it woke her up and it, in a way, like, made her more, it made her lose her innocence and it made her aware of things that she needed to know about. And I think, so, for me, I read that as her just basically taking God's law, and she was like, had this new awareness of what was around her.
So her eyes being open.
Yeah,
her knowledge,
exactly.
like a realization of everything.
Yeah, exactly.
As maybe a counterpoint to two of those, which are like, you're right, like there's a sense of she takes power over the situation, they find themselves naked. But at the top of page 229, there's this interesting little jab. In the fruit she never tasted, whether true or fancied so, through expectation high of knowledge, nor was Godhead from her thought. And I wonder, does that language suggest that she's kind of psyched herself out? Does she actually get any knowledge? Or does she think she's now smarter? Did
Just
she
because
think
it was like hyped up.
just
Yeah.
because it's been talked about and the
Yeah.
snake is speaking to her, she thinks, I've eaten this fruit. It's almost like this placebo effect.
So it's like she maybe didn't gain anything, she maybe lost something. I feel like it could be that too.
To kind of counter that too, I mean, I feel, well, she didn't, I don't think she attained like godly knowledge. I think it's more like self-knowledge because to the point where she eats the fruit and Han, and the snakes like hyping her up and all that, like, there's a lot of reference to like sexuality and to a lot of other like bodily things and like beauty as well. That like, I think that since she's been hyped up, like now, I think that she just has a better sense of who she is rather than like what's around her. Because like we don't hear anything about like knowledge of the gods or anything like that, like coming to her. Like she doesn't have like this the same sort of thinking that God does, but rather like I feel like she has a better sense of who she is.
So perhaps maybe not as much better knowledge, like divine knowledge, but
Like
maybe
self-awareness.
self-awareness
Yeah.
which would give her that kind of power and confidence to take action in the following
Because
scenes.
the realization of them becoming naked is like their self-awareness. So maybe it's that like they're able to like see things that they didn't know they didn't know. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
And was it Mr. Marsh or Miss Sayas? What do you
I
guys think?
absolutely agree. I feel like Eve has always been curious and she wanted to discover more about herself and why God placed them in the situation they were.
Mhm.
And I feel like she discovered something that she was looking for all along. And there was actually nothing that she actually found. There was no knowledge she actually acquired.
Yeah. No extra knowledge that she hadn't had prior to that. She didn't know all the angels. She didn't know.
So it's like
the right
subconscious maybe.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
brought to light.
What about you, Mr. Marsh?
Yeah,
Wrapping things
probably
up.
just agree with what you guys said. I mean, it's kind of hard to tell what exactly it is because they don't go into depth, but
Mhm.
I don't know.
Yeah, you're right. The author doesn't bring a lot of it up. He leaves a lot left to the imagination to figure out what exactly happens in her mind. If you think you could characterize it, though, what do you think happens in Eve's mind when she's eating that fruit? What do you think she thinks she knows?
I think that line is mentioned on, well, I think for the both of them.
Mm-hmm.
After they eat fruit on line 985, it says, opened eyes, new hopes, new joys.
Mm-hmm.
I think what they think that they know is that there's this whole new world out there that they have to experience, and all of a sudden they're very optimistic about the future and have a lot more of happy times to look forward to.
Mhm.
And that's before they go to sleep.
Yeah,
So-
I think it's also more freedom that they have. Like it even says online, I think it's near line 998 says, on my experience, Adam freely tastes and fear of death delivered to the wicked. So it just shows like she had a new, like when she did eat the apple, there was a sense of freedom that she didn't have before she did because it was freedom to learn and experience new things in a different way.
So we're a little over halfway time here. So let's jump into the next question. So what do you have for us?
Yeah, so my other cue was, so when Eve eats the forbidden fruit, she is kind of like looked down upon by Adam.
Mm-hmm.
And so my question was, when Milton wrote this, was he trying to speak to the inferiority of women
Mm-hmm.
because of this? So basically, was he trying to like make a statement about because Eve did this thing that she wasn't supposed to do? Was that supposed to mean that in the future, are women supposed to be inferior to men because of this?
Well, I feel like since you bring that up, like I feel like he's trying to reach out to the point that for people in the future to be aware that if women attain power, that they can do so much with that. I feel like that's kind of the message that he's trying to send through that. But that's a good point. I never really thought of that before. But yeah, definitely I think that is the message that women have this power that they can use, and they can definitely turn things around. So I think that's definitely what's the message here.
I mean, I also think like, was he trying to say that women should have power in the future, or that women, is it?
Maybe this problem could have been avoided if Adam was perhaps more freely giving of power to Eve.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I also
I think
think
so.
it shows like how she kind of exploits Adam in a sense. Like she knows that he's adamantly against like eating the fruit, and she still tempts him even though like she's been tempted, but she knows like where he stands at this point. He hasn't crossed the line. So I definitely feel like she exploited like him and like his weaknesses. Like his weakness being like him being enticed by her and like lust and everything.
Yeah, which is giving her power.
Yeah.
Right.
I can see where you're coming from with the question, though, with getting the sense that Adam has told Eve what to do, like, go do your thing, but
Exactly.
whatever you do, don't do this.
And so she's like his subordinate in the beginning. Like that's how it starts off. And so like, but then it kind of shifts. It goes to her being his subordinate, and then her calling the shots. Like, no, we're separating. Like it completely, it's a 180. Like it shifts.
Yeah, which I do
Definitely.
think, yeah, exactly, which I do think has effect in the future for women.
I also think it's interesting what Mr. Westcott had bringing up about the crown as like a sense of a reward or accomplishment or whatever. Like, who else gets rewards when they come back from doing things? Like subordinates. So just as support
Exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
for that
that's a good
statement.
point.
I was gonna say, what do you guys have in the way of this? Is it a comment on this? Is it a comment on the social nature of women, or their ability in society? Is Milton making a comment about superiority or inferiority?
I kind of agree with the question. I feel like Milton is categorizing women as, like, by saying female charm and all that, like in a category of deceiving man or something, and that might lead to that changed how we viewed Eve in the beginning to how we view her at the end.
And you bring up like how we as the readers view Eve, and I think how Adam looks at her also kind of gives us a kind of clue to this question. In the very end of book 9, Adam admits to this sort of failure. He says, "And perhaps I also erred in overmuch admiring what seemed in thee so perfect, that I thought that no evil would tempt thee. But I rue that error now, which has become my crime, and thou the accuser." So Adam himself saw Eve as perfect. I think that there's something to be said about the way that he looked at her and said, this woman, this other side of me is perfect in and of herself. So I wonder if the question of equality is being kind of approached very different ways. And again, in the Bible, we hear these soliloquies from both parties about man being, or woman being subordinate to man, and woman coming from the rib of man. But also in this book, we see Adam giving glimpses of perhaps it's a little more subtle. Perhaps there's a little more to it. And Adam himself just seems to think very highly of her to the point where he is willing to call her things like perfect, to make her these crowns, to make him queen of this universe.
Because he adores her.
Because he adores her.
Yeah, he did.
And rightfully so. She's apparently very attractive. I mean, I can see why. So I was going to say, what do you think? Do you think that she's every bit the perfection, or do you think that she's being made out as the weaker of the two?
Well, I don't know if I'm going to stay on the path here, but I kind of want to relate it to not necessarily power, but just how, I guess you could say, couples like them now in today's society. It's like, he does see her as like perfect and this goddess, but with that, I think he's surprised with what she did, and that she didn't go to him first to like consult, like how someone would, you know how today
Mm-hmm.
people are with each other, they like ask the other person for permission or like coincide with them. I don't know.
I definitely think it speaks to her beauty too, because he constantly talks about her looks and her, her charm. It even says like near line 1000, but finally overcome with female charm. So he kind of does, I think he is speaking to the role of women during that time or even in the future. That makes sense.
It's a good point. Kind of taking the text outside and like kind of applying to real world. So that's it's a good point to make, and also like just remembering like what kind of messages these authors are trying to get to us and what they're trying to say about the world that we now live in. So I guess moving on to our next question. We only have a few minutes left now, so why don't you get us started?
My question is, by placing the tree of life in the garden, did God destine Adam and Eve to fail, knowing that Satan was in the garden trying to tempt them?
I don't think
I don't
he,
think so.
yeah.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, so my point is, I don't really know if he destined them to fail. I think it was more of a test. I think he left them with something that he knew would tempt them, but I think he wanted to know if they would actually like follow that temptation, or rather like listen and follow God's will. So I think for them, he was just trying to see like what they would do.
I don't think his purpose was like they're predestined to fail, because if like that were the case, I don't think there'd be really any purpose in creating them, because it would just be for his mere entertainment at that point. I think that he did it like she said that as like a test for them, but also to show how like if they can and will fulfill like their duties in the garden that he gave them, and like to fulfill their lives and like ultimately reach God in heaven. But I don't think it was like done to like set them up for failure. I think it was done to set them up for greatness, but failure was the result. But like through that like failure, like good still came out. Like we still continued.
Yeah, I agree with the songs. Like, I definitely think that this was definitely a test of not to see who fails, but to see, to see if they would follow in His will, like not disobey any of His commands, and to see if they would just live their lives without doing anything that would hurt them. But I mean, in this case, it just so happened that so there was temptation, and things did fail. But I mean, in a way, I think it definitely shaped the way we view life now. Like we see temptation differently, and we know what path not to take and what not to take. So I think that's definitely a huge part of that.
And I think before going on, I think if you look at the beginning of book 3 with the argument, we hear what God says when he's talking in the summary. God again declares that grace cannot be extended toward man without the satisfaction of divine justice. Man hath offended God, the majesty of God, by aspiring to Godhead, and therefore with all his progeny devoted to death must die, unless someone can be found sufficient to answer for his offense and undergo the punishment, so on and so forth. And so I think one thing to keep in mind is when we're talking about God, we're talking about someone or something who is very beyond the scope of human experience and can't really be put into the boxes we usually put things into. And so I think what is interesting is God is characterized in this novel particularly as a seat of justice. He is making determinations based on actions. He is pursuing consequences according to prescriptions. So I think maybe not as much to deny the question of whether or not they're being set up for failure. I think it's simply a portrayal of God as someone who is perfectly just. Now, it can be then asked, well then if God is perfectly just, why I have this opportunity for failure in the first place? And I think it again goes back to the idea that this is a work meant to give an answer to a question of why do we get here in the first place? And so there needed to be some sort of fall, some sort of failure mechanism. And so it all needed to take place in sort of this mythologized standpoint. So I think your question is fair as to whether or not did God set them up for failure. I think my answer would be God isn't being portrayed as setting people up or trying to make people look bad. He is simply being represented both by the scripture, but especially by this author as a just judge who has to do his divine duty. Because I think it says in the text, his grace cannot be extended towards man. He's not punishing man, but simply withholding something he can't give them at this point. So I think I cut you off. Go ahead, Anne.
I think that this is a really good question. I think that this question is also what's important is that it's also kind of addressed by Eve on page 228. She is talking about whether or not she thinks that this is before she eats the fruit, she's thinking about whether or not that they actually have freedom here in paradise. And she says, for us alone was death invented. So she's kind of pondering with some of the same thoughts, like why was this here, what is our purpose, whatnot. But my personal take on it is not that this tree was placed there as an opportunity for failure, but as an opportunity for success. That just as Mr. Westcott said, God is just and is not offering simply one path, but an opportunity for both. So I think that is, as Mr. Westcott said, how God would think about it, but for Eve as a human, it's important to recognize that she mostly sees the failure and the opportunity for death in this situation.
They close us out on this. So did God set us all up?
I think God did set up for Adam and Eve to fall, but he did it in a way that like he wasn't aware. So what I'm trying to say is he set them up to fall. He set them up to fall, but he didn't know how it was going to happen and who was going to be like the one who ends up making the biggest mistake was the fall. You know what I mean? So it's kind of just, it was a test to see what happened, but he didn't have any influence on it.
Alright. Well, I was going to say now it's your turn to ask a question.
Yeah.
So go ahead, knock us dead.
So
Yeah.
page 238, line 1134. Adam, or this is after they start having all that anger and hate towards each other.
Mm-hmm.
And Adam says, if you had just stayed instead of wandering off on your own, we'd still be in this happy state. And then he responds with saying that if it wasn't me that was being persuaded by the serpent, it could have easily been you. And so the question is there a reason, and is Eve wrong for kind of not taking the blame for what has happened and kind of just shooting the blame back at Adam?
So who's
Who's to blame?
Who's responsible, yeah. And like, is
For
she
the
wrong?
initial act of it, or like,
Just who's responsible for where they are right now.
Because Adam is saying you
Just
should have
for the fall.
listened to me, and she's firing back with, well, this could have happened to you.
Yeah.
So is she just in firing back at him?
Yeah.
Or
So
should
really,
she-
you're really cutting to the argument. Who's to blame for the fall of the two of them, Adam or Eve? If we're just restricting it to two of them. Okay.
I'd say it would be Eve, simply because like, regardless if they had separated, like it could have been Adam, but like, she has the power to say if she wants to separate from work or not, like, it's up to her, but she just didn't have the willpower to say no. So like, that's, she's culpable for that, and she should take accountability for that. That
Yeah.
her enticing Adam would be an entirely different thing, like, it's Adam's fault for succumbing to her lust.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that she is right in saying yes, it could have easily just happened to you as it did to me, but that doesn't change the fact that it ultimately did happen to her, and she was the one who, was tempted by the apple.
Mhm.
And so I think ultimately, yeah, it is kind of, she does have that blame in that she made that choice and she couldn't fight that temptation.
Like, I don't see anything wrong with her choosing to separate to work, because like, that's just whatever, like, she wanted to get more done, I guess, be more efficient. But I just think that, like, her, like, not being able to say no to Satan was, like, her downfall.
I mean, I also think that it could just be both of their faults too. I mean, yeah, Eve did give into the temptation, but then she also had like this new self worth where like she thought she was so beautiful, so powerful now that like she has all this power to pull Adam into her clutches basically. But and then you also have Adam who also gave into her new beauty, her new power, all this temptation that he's now feeling, and now he's pulling himself into this mess. So I mean, in a way, I think it has to do with both of them, just with the downfall. Like they're just both screwing things up. So I mean, yeah, I don't think it's just one person. I think both of them had a lot to do with the downfall.
I can agree with Mr. Castellano because I think that both of their vices played an important part in their downfall. That Satan targeted Eve's weakness as Natalie and had to play to that first before he could get to Adam's weakness of Eve. So I think that it had to go down in this order, so to speak.
Sure.
maybe perhaps of a non-answer. But what's interesting, I think, the last few lines kind of get to the point of, gets to the heart of it. Thus they in mutual accusation spent the fruitless hours, but neither self-condemning, and of their vain contest appeared no end. And I think it's funny they use the word fruitless hours to kind of knock at them for their sin. But the thing is, they were neither self-condemning, and the contest appeared without end. The question of who is to blame, Adam or Eve, is exactly what Satan wanted. He wanted there to be blame split to the degree that even us to this very day continue this contest back and forth, who is to blame. And neither one is actually willing to say it was them. If someone had owned up to it, it would have been so much easier. If one of them said, yeah, it was me. It was all my fault. I could have done so much better. There would have been an answer. But the fact that they play into this very question, they play into your very hands, by continuing to go at each other, I think really wraps into that whole question. So, I mean, it's more of a meta answer. Who's to blame, Adam or Eve? That's the point. That is, I think that is the ultimate tragedy, is that that you can never perfectly answer that question.
And then also with like sin today, like how sin is viewed, like how to what degree is each person culpable for their sins?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that's like a really tough question because like sin, like what goes into that is like knowledge, intent, and like will. So I mean, like there's like varying degrees of that really complicates that.
I agree with her. I feel like Eve had the intent of disobeying God from the beginning because she was questioning God, but Adam wasn't questioning God from the beginning. He only questioned God in that circumstance because Eve put him in that circumstance of either choosing her or choosing God. And if it wasn't for that, Adam would have fallen.
And it's not like Eve was coerced into it. Like Eve did that knowingly and like willingly. It's not like someone held her like arm and made her do it.
Well, we have only about 3 minutes left, actually. We're a little bit over time, so I guess we'll just close out. I think I got a simple question. You can maybe go around and answer this. And it's the idea that Satan keeps saying that he is going to make heaven a hell, hell a heaven. He likes to flip-flop things, and there's this inversion. And it's clear that he wants to continue this into Eden, and that's how he's going to win over God and beat God at his own game. So my question is this: at what point in Book 9 did heaven become hell? At what point did paradise become purgatory and start the process by which man has to redeem itself? If you were to pick a single moment in the events that transpired, and maybe not even in Book 9, but when does that pivotal moment happen?
I think it has to do when they both realize that they're making, not just when Eve, because then that's them kind of, that's both of them feeling like the transgressions of their sins. Like that's both of them really feeling the consequence of that. And that's when that's when everything kind of begins to crumble. I think it's like when they both realize that they're naked. It's when they feel shamed and miserable.
Mhm.
So like that's the moment.
I agree with the Sons. Like definitely, I think that was a really strong point in Book 9 where they finally realize what they've done wrong after they have sex and once they're naked as well. And I think that just brings up a lot about all the wrong that they've done and the sin that they've committed, and I think they definitely see and learn. Well, not yet learn from it because soon we see that they argue about it. But I definitely think that that's where now heaven becomes a hell, especially too. I think also the arguing is also. I mean, nobody likes to argue at all. So I think that's the hell part of it. Is like now that they both realize the sin that they've committed. Now they're just bickering, fighting each other. I think that's the hell part of that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that for me, I would take the end of Book 9, the last few lines. I would say that when they're sitting there debating on, who was it to blame or who, that's kind of, it flipped for them because their heaven is now become hell because they literally are sitting there and, they despise each other, they're angry with each other, they have this regret in them with, what they did, and they kind of have to live with it now. So I think that for me was the moment where I was like, wow, it even says, thus they in mutual accusation spent their fruitless hours, but neither self-condemning, and of their vain contest appeared to no end. And there's kind of no end to this hell of purgatory. So that's for me.
Someone's trying to call me, but they're gonna have to wait. So go ahead. I was gonna say, keep moving down the line.
For me, I feel like it's on line 1053. It says, "Soon found their eyes how opened and their minds how darkened in innocence that as a real had shadowed them for knowing ill was gone. I guess when they were innocent, that's when they lost their innocence, that's when heaven came.
I think they lose that sense of heaven when they get the idea that their punishment is going to be death,
Mm-hmm.
and because previously they don't know that what's going to happen if they eat the fruit until what is it? Or they know, when the serpent goes up to Eve and he says that for surely I didn't die.
Mhm.
I don't know. I guess it's just
So I guess death
that's the
ruins it.
moment when they start worrying
Mhm.
and like it's in the back of their mind.
Yeah. I was gonna say, you didn't get to answer it yet. So.
I would kind of take a little different stance and say that it happened a little bit earlier in the book. I would kind of pinpoint it on page 215 when they start losing a little bit of their ignorance is bliss and start questioning a little bit of on line 326 and how are we happy still in fear of harm and frail is our happiness. So as soon as they start thinking a little bit more about their situation, that's when I think hell actually starts creeping in slowly.
And I guess maybe to finish things out, my proposition is this in 234, when Adam takes the bite. Because it says the sky lowered and muttered thunder, some sad drops wept at the completing of the mortal sin. Is that is when that sin has been brought to completion, and then we start seeing these negative effects playing itself out in some of those things that we've seen talked about. So I guess that wraps up our talk show. Thank you for watching, and have a good night. And we will be done in just a moment.